Have you ever wondered how a piece of glass could save a life? My mirror not only saved mine, but also gave me the chance to seek justice when no one else could. Good morning, my dear friends. My name is Evelyn May Caldwell, and today, at 78 years old, I've decided to open my heart and share a story I've carried in silence for so long that it was weighing too heavily on my soul. I was born in Willowbrook, a small town in rural Oregon in 1947, in a simple wooden house that my father managed to build saving penny by penny. Times were tough back then. We barely had enough to eat, but there was never a shortage of love in that small home. My father, Walter, was a man with hands calloused from working in the lumber mill, but with a heart as soft as cotton. My mother, Vivian, well, she was a different kind of person. For as long as I can remember, she was always complaining about life, about poverty, about the house, about my father. Nothing was good enough. Nothing was sufficient. I was 5 years old when she decided that life wasn't good enough for her anymore. One Sunday morning, she packed a small bundle of clothes, took my brother Nathan by the hand, he was 10 at the time, and told my father, "Walter, I'm tired of this misery. I'm going to try my luck in Seattle with the boy. The girl stays with you. I can't manage to take both." And just like that, without further explanation, my mother walked out of our lives. There were no tears, no goodbye hugs. She simply turned her back and left, taking my brother and leaving a void that my father tried to fill with all the love he had. "It's just going to be the two of us now, my little Daisy," he said that night as I cried, missing my brother. "But Daddy promises to take good care of you. You hear?" And he really did. Walter was both father and mother to me. He would wake up before dawn, prepare oatmeal before heading to the mill, and leave everything neat for when I woke up. He'd return at lunchtime, make a simple but tasty meal, and in the evenings, he would sit with me to teach me my letters. He barely knew how to read himself, poor man, but he insisted that I learn. "Education is the only thing no one can take away from you, my daughter," he would always say, pointing to the letters in an old newspaper someone had given him. "Your daddy didn't have that chance, but you will." And so I grew up, in the simplicity of that wooden house, with a father who was everything to me. When I turned 7, he managed to enroll me in the little school in our town. It was far. I walked almost an hour to get there, but I went happily with my little notebook under my arm, proud because I already knew how to write my name thanks to my father's lessons. From my mother and brother, we had no news. Occasionally, someone coming from Seattle would say, "I ran into Vivian over there. She's working as a housekeeper. The boy is with her." And that was it. No letters, no direct messages. It was as if they had vanished from the world. As if those first 5 years of my life were just a distant dream. My father never spoke ill of her in front of me. When I asked why my mother had left, he would only say, "Your mother needed to find a different path, my child. Sometimes we need to make difficult choices in life." At the time, I didn't understand, but today I know he was trying to preserve my image of her, even after being abandoned with a small child to raise. The years went by, and that wound of abandonment gradually healed. My father and I created our own routine, our own way of being a family. He taught me how to plant a garden, to cook, to recognize wild herbs that could be used as medicine. I helped in the garden after school, carried water from the well, swept the yard. It was a simple life of hard work, but also of great affection. When I turned 12, my father got a better job in town as a construction worker. We left our little country house and moved to a small rental house on the outskirts of Willowbrook. It was luxury for us. It had electric lights, running water, a real bathroom. I still remember my joy at turning on a light bulb for the first time, without needing the kerosene lamp that had been our companion for so many years. "See, my girl? Things are getting better for us," my father would say, proud to be able to give me a little more comfort. "Now you'll be able to study at a better school, have more opportunities." And that's what happened. I entered a school in town, made friends, started dreaming of a different future. My father worked hard, came home exhausted, but always had a smile for me, always asked how my day had been, if I had learned new things. I was growing up, and he was aging. His hands became more calloused, his hair whitening, his back bending a little more with each year of carrying heavy loads at construction sites. But he never complained. "Work doesn't kill anyone," he used to say. What kills is the sadness of not being able to give the best to those we love. Our life followed its quiet course, as much as possible. We had little, but it was ours, earned honestly. I was 16, finishing junior high, when my father's health problems began. At first, they were just stomach pains that he tried to hide, saying he had eaten something that didn't agree with him. Then came the weight loss, the constant fatigue, the blood in his stool that he tried to hide from me, but that I discovered when washing his clothes. "Dad, you need to see a doctor," I insisted, worried about his paleness, the way he could barely eat without feeling pain. "This will pass, my daughter," he insisted. "It's just a gut inflammation. I've had it before." But it didn't pass. It only got worse, until the day he collapsed at work and was rushed to the hospital. The diagnosis came like a punch to the stomach: colon cancer, already in an advanced stage. The doctor took me aside and was honest. "Girl, prepare yourself. Your father has only a few months to live." How can I describe what I felt at that moment? It was as if the ground had disappeared from under my feet, as if the entire world had collapsed on top of me. My father was all I had. My father was my entire family. How was I going to live without him? My dear friends, it's so hard to remember this time. If you're enjoying my story, please help this old lady out and leave a like down below. And tell me in the comments where you're watching from and what your name is. This grandma here is happy to know who's on the other side of the screen, giving me a little bit of attention. And subscribe to the channel too, okay? So you don't miss the rest of this story that still has a lot to tell. Getting back to it. My father was hospitalized for 2 weeks, but the doctors soon saw that there wasn't much they could do beyond controlling the pain. They asked us to take him home so he could spend his last days in the comfort of home with those he loved. And so we did. I fixed up our little house as best I could, improvised a bed in the living room because he could no longer walk to the bedroom. I took leave from school to care for him full time. I bathed him, fed him by hand, changed his bandages, administered the pain medications that the clinic provided. "My daughter," he said to me one night when the pain had given him a brief respite, "I'm worried about you. What will happen when I'm gone? You're still a minor. You can't support yourself alone." "Don't think about that now, Dad," I would reply, swallowing my tears. "You're going to get better, you'll see." But we both knew it was a lie. He was wasting away before my eyes, losing weight, getting weaker every day. And I was desperate, not knowing what would become of me when he passed. That's when he brought up a subject we hadn't talked about in years: my mother. "Evelyn," he said, his voice already weak, "we need to find your mother. When I'm gone, you'll need someone, and she's your family too." I protested, of course. That woman had abandoned us, had chosen another path. Why should she come back into our lives now? But my father, with that wisdom that only simple people have, convinced me. "Resentment only hurts the one who carries it, my child. Your mother wronged us, yes, but everyone deserves a second chance. And you'll need her." Reluctantly, I agreed. A neighbor who frequently traveled to Seattle offered to look for my mother with the few details we had: her full name and the neighborhood where she had gone to live when she left us. Incredibly, he found her. She was living in a poor neighborhood in Seattle, working as a domestic servant. My brother Nathan, now 21, lived with her. When the neighbor returned with the address and news that my mother had said she would come to see us, I felt a mixture of relief and apprehension. Relief because, deep down, I knew my father was right. I would need someone when he was gone. Apprehension because, well, how would it be to reunite with this woman who had chosen to leave me behind? My father didn't live to see this reunion. On a cold July dawn, while I dozed in a chair next to his improvised bed, he passed away, quietly, without fanfare, just as he had lived his entire life. When I woke up and touched his hand, it was already cold. I cried, holding that thin body that had been my safe harbor for so many years, cried until I had no more tears, cried for all the things he wouldn't see: my graduation, my possible wedding, my children who would never know the wonderful grandfather they could have had. The funeral was simple, like everything in our lives. The neighbors helped with the coffin, with the flowers, with the food after the ceremony. I was in shock, functioning on autopilot, unable to process that I was now truly alone in the world. Or perhaps not so alone, Because 3 days after the funeral, when I was still lost in grief, not knowing what to do or where to go, there was a knock at the door of our little house. It was her, my mother. Vivian, older, more worn by life, but with the same hard eyes I remembered from childhood. And beside her, a tall, thin man whom I took a while to recognize as my brother Nathan. "I've come to get you," she said, without a hug, without tears for the ex-husband who had just passed. "Pack your things. You're going to live with us in Seattle." I had no strength or will to argue. What else could I do? I was 16, without a job, without money, without prospects. I gathered what little I had, some clothes, documents, a photo of my father, and followed that almost stranger of a woman and that brother I barely remembered to a new life in the big city. Little did I know that I was leaving the paradise that had been life with my father to enter a hell that would change my destiny forever. The journey to Seattle was long and silent. Sitting on that old bus, with the constant vibration and the smell of diesel making me nauseous, I looked out the window at the landscapes of rural Oregon passing by, feeling that each mile took me further away from the only place I had known as home. My mother and brother barely spoke to me during the entire trip. Every now and then, she would look at me sideways, as if she were evaluating me, measuring me, calculating something I couldn't understand. "Too skinny," was one of the few comments she made. She didn't ask if I was okay, didn't mention my father, didn't want to know how those years had been. It was as if I were a stranger she had been forced to pick up, not a daughter she hadn't seen in more than 10 years. We arrived in Seattle as night was falling. The damp chill of the big city suffocated me after so long living in the milder climate of Willowbrook. We took a crowded city bus, then walked through narrow alleys in a neighborhood I later learned was called Rainier Valley. Small houses, piled together with electrical wires forming chaotic webs above our heads. Children running barefoot, loud music coming from some bars, the smell of open sewage mixed with the aroma of fried food. My mother's house was small, but made of brick, which was already a luxury in that neighborhood. Just 2 rooms, a living room that also served as a kitchen and a bedroom. There was no bathroom inside, just an area in the back with an improvised shower and an outhouse with a pit toilet. "You'll sleep here in the living room," she said, pointing to a thin mattress leaning against a corner. "Me and your brother will stay in the bedroom." I nodded without energy to question, still numb from the pain of losing my father, from the abrupt change, from the uncertain future that was taking shape before me. I put my small bundle of clothes in a corner, sat on the mattress, and stayed there, staring at nothing, lost in thoughts about how my life had turned upside down in such a short time. My mother prepared a simple dinner, rice, beans, and a fried egg. We ate in silence, only the sound of utensils against plates filling that uncomfortable space. After eating, she and Nathan went to the bedroom, closed the door, and I was left alone in the living room, lying on that thin mattress, looking at the peeling ceiling, tears silently streaming from the corners of my eyes. "Dad," I whispered in the dark, "how am I going to endure this without you?" The first days in that house were strange, as if I were living someone else's life. My mother left early for work at the family home where she was a servant. Nathan also left, but I didn't really know where to. Sometimes he said he was looking for work. Other times he mentioned something about taking care of some business. I stayed alone in the house, responsible for cleaning, washing clothes, preparing dinner for when they returned. On the 3rd day, my mother arrived with news that, at the moment, seemed positive. I talked to my employer, and she agreed to take you on at the house too, to help with the heavy cleaning. It's not every day, just when they really need it, but it's a little money coming in. I thanked her, genuinely grateful for the opportunity. Maybe things wouldn't be as bad as they seemed. Maybe with time, we could build some kind of relationship, even if late. Maybe she had changed over the years, regretted leaving us, and was now trying to make up for it in the way she could. How wrong I was. The work at her employer's house was exhausting. It was a huge mansion in the Queen Anne neighborhood with so many rooms and bathrooms that I lost count. They had me clean everything that was most difficult, scrubbing floors on my knees, cleaning windows at dangerous heights, carrying heavy loads of laundry. I would arrive home exhausted, with my hands raw from chemicals, my back aching, my knees scraped. The worst part was that I barely saw the money I earned. My mother received everything directly from the employer and gave me only a few coins, saying the rest was to help with household expenses. I couldn't question. After all, where else would I live? What else could I do, at 16, without a complete education, without knowing anyone in the big city? Despite all the exhaustion, I still tried to keep alive the dream of continuing my education. My father had taught me the value of education, and I didn't want to give up on that. When I mentioned looking for a night school to finish junior high, my mother let out a dry laugh. Study? What for? To get all high and mighty like your father, always with his head in the clouds? What good did all that talk of education do him? He died poor anyway, without leaving you anything. Those words hurt me more than any slap. My father had sacrificed his whole life for me, had given me the best he could with the little he had. Hearing her talk about him that way awakened an anger I didn't even know existed inside me. "Don't talk about him like that," I replied, my voice trembling. My father was a good man, hardworking, honest. If he didn't leave material possessions, he left values that are worth much more. The slap came quickly, cracking hard against my cheek, taking me by surprise. My mother had never hit me before, simply because she wasn't present in my upbringing. That was the first time, but it was far from the last. "Here you don't talk back, girl. Here you lower your head and obey. You're eating my food, you're sleeping under my roof, so you follow my rules." I swallowed my tears, swallowed my anger, swallowed the heartbreaking longing for my father. At that moment, I understood that I had left a home of love to enter a house of oppression. But what could I do? Where would I go? How would I survive alone? I decided to endure it. Endure until I saved enough money to leave, until I was old enough to make it on my own, until I found a way out of that nightmare that had barely begun. The days dragged on, each one the same as the last. Wake up early, work at the employer's house when called, take care of my mother's house when not, cook, wash, iron, sleep. Exhausted on that thin mattress in the living room, dream of my father, wake up crying in the middle of the night. Nathan hardly spoke to me. It was as if we were two strangers sharing the same space, not blood siblings. He came and went at any hour, sometimes brought friends, drank, smoked, looked at me in a way that made me uncomfortable. It was on a Sunday, exactly 1 month after my father's death, that I noticed something different in the air. My mother, who normally left even on weekends to do extra cleaning jobs, said she would stay home. Nathan was also there, with that strange look I had learned to fear. The two whispered in corners, stopped talking when I approached, exchanged glances I couldn't decipher. "Go take a shower, girl," my mother suddenly ordered, in the middle of the afternoon. "Get yourself properly cleaned up. I have a surprise for you." Surprise? What kind of surprise could that bitter woman have for me? Suspicious, but with no option but to obey, I went to the small bathroom in the back. The cold water from the improvised shower gave me goosebumps, but I had gotten used to it. I washed my hair with the harsh soap that served for everything, scrubbed my tired body, trying to imagine what surprise that would be. Maybe, I thought in a flash of hope, she had realized the suffering I was going through. Maybe she had decided to enroll me in a school, or give me a break from the heavy work, or simply have a sincere conversation from mother to daughter after so many years apart. How naive I was. I returned inside wrapped in a towel, as I hadn't taken clean clothes to the bathroom. I entered the living room expecting to be able to go to my corner, where I kept my few pieces of clothing, to get dressed in peace. But upon entering, I froze at the door. My mother was sitting in a chair, with an expression that mixed expectation and a kind of cruel satisfaction. Beside her, standing, Nathan stared at me with a look that made my blood run cold. And worst of all, there was another man there, a middle-aged stranger, pot-bellied, with a thick mustache and thinning hair, looking me up and down as if I were a piece of meat at the butcher shop. Who is that?" I asked, clutching the towel against my body, feeling a vulnerability I had never experienced before. "That's Mr. Harkins," my mother replied with naturalness, as if it were the most normal thing in the world. "Your brother's friend. He came to meet you." "Meet me? Like that? With that look, while I was in a towel?" An alarm sounded in my head. Something was very wrong here. "Let me get dressed first," I said, trying to pass by them to reach my clothes. But Nathan blocked my path, grabbing my arm forcefully. "The surprise is now, sis," he said, with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Mom wants to show you something important." It was then that I noticed something I hadn't before. A large mirror, a full-length one that had never been there. It was strategically positioned in a corner of the room, facing the small, torn sofa. "What's happening here?" I asked, panic beginning to rise in my throat, my legs trembling so much I thought I would fall right there. "What's happening, Evelyn?" my mother said, rising and coming toward me with those hard eyes I had learned to fear. "Is that it's time for you to learn to be truly useful in this house. It's time for you to understand how a woman gets things in life." At that moment, I understood the horror that awaited me. I understood what that mirror meant, why that disgusting man was there, why my brother was holding me so tightly that his fingers left marks on my skin. I tried to scream, tried to break free, tried to run. But where would I go? Who would help me? In a neighborhood where screams were common, where everyone minded their own business to survive, who would come to the rescue of a 16-year-old girl against her own family? What happened next was the beginning of a nightmare that would last much longer than I could bear. A nightmare in front of a mirror that, ironically, would one day become my only hope of salvation. Today you're going to learn to serve a man, not live like a tick sucking money here at home. You're going to learn for real, not like that fool of a father taught you. My mother's words cut through the air like sharp knives as Nathan dragged me toward that old, torn sofa, positioned in front of the mirror that had never been there before. I struggled, tried to break free, but my brother was much stronger. He had grown in all those years away from me, was no longer the boy I remembered playing in the yard of our house in Willowbrook. He was a man now, with hardened muscles and a cruelty in his eyes that I didn't recognize. "Let me go, Nathan, for God's sake," I begged, tears already streaming down my face. "I'm your sister." He just laughed, a dry laugh, without humor, without life. "Sister? You were never my sister. You stayed with the old man, had the good life while we struggled here in the city. Now it's your turn to really work." Work? I already worked to exhaustion in that house and in my mother's employer's house. What more did they want from me? The answer came in the form of those rough hands throwing me onto the sofa, the towel being violently ripped from my body, leaving me exposed, vulnerable, humiliated in front of that large mirror that reflected my terror. The man, Mr. Harkins, approached, licking his thick lips, his small eyes gleaming with a sick excitement. "Hold her properly," my mother ordered Nathan, "and make her look at the mirror. I want her to see, to learn how it's done." I won't describe in detail what happened in that small room, on that filthy sofa, in front of that cruel mirror. There are things too heavy to put into words, wounds that even after so many decades still bleed when touched. I can only say that on that day I lost much more than my innocence. I lost faith in humanity, lost trust in blood ties, lost hope that there was any goodness in the one who should have protected me. The worst wasn't the physical violence, although it was brutal. The worst were my mother's eyes in the mirror, watching me, sometimes giving instructions, as if it were a class, a necessary learning. As if she were doing me a favor by subjecting me to that horror. "Look at the mirror, Evelyn," she would repeat when I closed my eyes, trying to escape at least mentally from that hell. "Learn to serve a man properly. This is how a woman manages to get by in life." When it finally ended, when that disgusting man got off me, leaving behind the smell of sour sweat and cheap cigarettes, I remained curled up on the sofa, trembling, crying silently, feeling pains that went far beyond the physical. Nathan left with the man, laughing and telling jokes as if nothing had happened. My mother stayed, looking at me with an expression that mixed contempt and something like satisfaction. "Clean yourself up and fix this room," she said, throwing my towel over my naked and bruised body. "And stop whimpering. This was just the beginning. Mr. Harkins paid well, and there are others interested. From now on, you're going to start compensating for all the money I spent bringing you from Willowbrook." It was like a bucket of ice water. It hadn't been an isolated act of cruelty. It was a plan, a business, a way to make money at the expense of my dignity, my body, my soul. That night, lying on the thin mattress in the living room that now seemed contaminated by the horror it had witnessed, I made two promises to myself. First, that I would find a way to escape from there no matter how. Second, that one day, somehow, I would get justice for what they had done to me. But escaping wouldn't be easy. In the days that followed, I realized I was constantly being watched. If it wasn't my mother, it was Nathan, always nearby, always observing me. They wouldn't let me go out alone, wouldn't let me talk to anyone beyond what was strictly necessary. I had become a prisoner in that house that had been a prison from the first day. And the nightmare continued. Every few days, a different man would appear, some old, others younger. Some pretended gentleness, others didn't even bother to disguise their brutality. All paid, not to me, of course, but to my mother, who managed that macabre business with the efficiency of an experienced entrepreneur. And always, always the mirror. Always the order to look, to see, to learn. That rectangular mirror, with a dark wooden frame peeling at the corners, became the symbol of my personal hell. I hated it with all my strength, hated what it showed me, hated how it multiplied my suffering by forcing me to witness my own degradation. The weeks dragged on, each day the same as the previous one in its brutality. I tried to disconnect mentally when it happened, tried to transport myself elsewhere, think about my father, about the peaceful afternoons in Willowbrook, about anything that wasn't that unbearable reality. But it was hard to escape completely when your own mother is there, watching, commenting, sometimes even laughing. "See how easy it is?" she would say afterward, counting the money in front of me. "Your father never taught you this, did he? Always with that talk of study, of honest work. Look how much you earned for the family today, without making any effort." Without making any effort? Each one of those sessions destroyed me a little more. Each time I was forced to look in the mirror, I saw less of myself, as if I were disappearing little by little, being replaced by an empty shell, a body without a soul. Nathan was even worse. When we were alone at home, he would look at me in a way that gave me chills. Until one day, after almost 2 months in that hell, what I feared most happened. "If you do this for strangers, why not for me too?" he asked, cornering me in the kitchen while I washed the dinner dishes. I tried to argue, to beg, to say we were siblings, that it was wrong in every possible way. He just laughed, that same lifeless laugh that had become as familiar as it was terrifying. "Siblings? You're just a little slut that the old man preferred to keep. We barely know each other. And besides," he added, holding my face forcefully, his fingers squeezing my cheeks until it hurt, "you're not even that good. You need more practice." It was the first time, but it wasn't the last. My own brother, blood of my blood, joined the parade of monsters that passed through that house. And he was worse than all of them, because he knew my weak points, knew exactly how to hurt me more, how to humiliate me more deeply. And always, always in front of the mirror. "So you learn to get better," he would say, forcing me to look at my own reflection while he violated me. "Mom's right. You need to see to learn." At a certain point, they started giving me drinks before the sessions. Cheap whiskey that burned my throat and blurred my senses. At first, I resisted, didn't want to lose control, didn't want to make things easier for them. But with time, I came to accept, even to desire that temporary numbness. It was the only way to endure, to disconnect at least a little from that unbearable reality. It was during one of those drunken nights that I had an epiphany. I was lying on the sofa, alone for the first time in many hours, staring fixedly at that mirror I hated so much. The alcohol had left my mind foggy, but somehow also clearer in certain aspects. Looking at my own reflection, dull eyes, thin face, empty expression, I thought, what if this mirror, which has been my curse, could become my salvation? The idea started small, just a glimmer in the alcoholic fog. But in the days that followed, it grew, took shape, transformed into a plan. A desperate, dangerous, perhaps even insane plan. But it was the only hope I had. I began to observe more carefully the routine of the house, the habits of my mother and Nathan. I noticed that on Tuesdays she stayed later at her employer's house, and on Thursdays Nathan usually went out with friends and only returned in the early morning. I also noticed that the money, that dirty money they earned at the expense of my dignity, was kept in an old cookie tin hidden under the mattress in their room. Slowly, carefully, I assembled my plan. I needed to be patient, wait for the right moment, not raise suspicions. It was difficult to maintain sanity while the abuses continued, almost daily now. But that small seed of hope, that possibility of escape and justice, gave me strength to endure one more day, and one more, and one more. 1 month after my epiphany, when I had been in that hell for almost 4 months, an opportunity arose. My mother announced that the next day she would travel to the countryside with her employer to help with a party at the family's beach house. She would be gone for 3 days. "Nathan will keep an eye on you," she said, staring at me with those hard eyes that never showed a hint of maternal love. "And there's a client scheduled for Friday night, an important man who pays well. I don't want you to ruin this." I nodded obediently, head down, hiding the spark of hope that this news had kindled. 3 days. My mother would be gone for 3 days. It was more than I had hoped for, more than I had asked for in my silent prayers. The next morning, I said goodbye to her with the same submission I had learned to show. Inside, my heart was racing, anticipating what was to come. As soon as she left, Nathan threw himself on the sofa, turned on the small television we had, and opened a beer. "I'm going out with the guys tonight," he announced, without even looking at me. "Don't try anything funny, understand? If I find out you left this house, you're dead." "Yes," I replied softly. "I'll stay here. I'll just tidy things up and rest." He looked at me suspiciously for a moment, but soon returned his attention to the TV. I knew he would leave around 7 in the evening and would only return in the early morning, too drunk to notice anything. It was my chance, my only chance. I spent the day pretending normalcy, cleaning the house, preparing food, acting like the submissive prisoner they thought I was. Inside, I rehearsed each step of my plan, each movement, every detail. When Nathan finally left, I waited another half-hour to be sure he wouldn't return because he had forgotten something. Then, with hands trembling from nervousness and adrenaline, I began to act. First, I went to their room. I lifted the mattress and found the cookie tin. Inside, as expected, there was a considerable amount of money, the dirty money they had earned selling my body, my dignity, my soul. I took it all without a hint of remorse. It wasn't theft. It was recovery. It was justice. Then, I went to my corner in the living room, where I kept my few things. I took the photo of my father, the only physical memento I had of him, and a simple dress I had brought from Willowbrook. I didn't need anything else from that place. I wanted to leave everything behind, including the memories. Finally, I went to it, the mirror. That object that had been a silent witness to my personal hell for so many months. I looked at my reflection one last time. A 16-year-old girl with eyes that seemed to have seen centuries of suffering. A thin, pale face that I hardly recognized as my own. "It's over," I whispered to my reflection. "It's over, and now they're going to pay." With a quick movement, I took the mirror off the wall. It was heavy, but the adrenaline gave me strength I didn't know I had. I placed it on the floor, with the reflective face up. Then, I took the hammer I had hidden earlier, concealed under the sofa. With a single strong and decisive blow, I broke the mirror into several pieces. The sound of breaking glass was like music to my ears. The sound of liberation, the sound of my life shattering so it could be rebuilt anew. Carefully, I chose 2 large, sharp pieces, wrapped them in a cloth, and stored them in the small bag I had improvised from an old pillowcase. The rest of the mirror I left there, broken, a symbol of what was to come. The initial plan was simply to run away. Take the money, the mirror shards, and disappear into the night. Perhaps catch a bus heading south, as far as possible from that nightmare. But as I prepared everything, an idea began to form in my mind. A terrible, dangerous idea that went against all the values my father had taught me, but also an idea that seemed just, necessary, inevitable. They deserved to feel in their skin a bit of what I had felt. They deserved to look in the mirror and see the reflection of the evil they had done. They deserved justice in the most brutal and poetic way possible. So instead of running away immediately, I sat on the sofa and waited. Waited with the mirror shards hidden by my side, with my heart beating so hard I thought it would burst from my chest. Waited with a strange calm, a cold determination I had never felt before. Nathan arrived around 3 in the morning, staggering drunk, barely able to put the key in the lock. When he finally entered, it took him a few seconds to register the scene. Me sitting calmly on the sofa, the broken mirror on the floor, the pieces reflecting the weak light of the single lamp in the room. "What the hell is this?" he asked, his voice slurred by alcohol. "You broke the mirror? You're in deep trouble, Squirt. When Mom finds out—" "Mom won't know," I replied, with a voice that didn't seem like mine, firm, cold, determined. "Because you're not going to tell her." He laughed, that scornful laugh I had learned to hate. "And who's going to stop me? You? A weakling who can't even defend herself?" I rose slowly from the sofa, firmly holding the hidden mirror shard in my hand. "I'm not that weak girl anymore, Nathan. You and she took care of that, didn't you? Taught me well. Made me look in the mirror, remember? To learn. And I learned. I learned very well." He frowned, confused by my attitude, probably attributing to alcohol the difficulty in understanding what was happening. He took a step in my direction, threatening as always. "Come here, you ungrateful little slut. I'll teach you not to break other people's things." That's when I showed the mirror shard, the sharp point gleaming in the dim light. His eyes widened, finally understanding the gravity of the situation. "What are you going to do with that?" he asked, his voice no longer so confident. "I'm going to make you look in the mirror, Nathan," I replied, taking a step toward him. "Just like you both made me look so many times. Only this time, you're going to see your true reflection. You're going to see the monster that you are." He tried to back away but stumbled, alcohol impairing his reflexes. He fell sitting on the floor, looking at me with a mixture of fear and disbelief. "You wouldn't dare," he said, but his voice trembled. "Wouldn't I?" I asked, more to myself than to him. "After everything you did to me? After destroying my life, my innocence, my faith in humanity? You really think I wouldn't dare?" I took another step toward him, the mirror shard firm in my hand. He dragged himself backward, trying to get away, fear now evident in his eyes. "Evelyn, calm down. We can talk." "Talk? Now you want to talk? After months of treating me like an object, like a thing you could use and abuse, now you want dialogue?" I was so close to him now that I could smell the strong odor of drink on his breath. I saw the sweat running down his forehead, the tremor in his lips. I saw the fear, the same fear I had felt so many times at his hands. It was at this moment, with the mirror shard inches from his face, that something strange happened inside me. A voice, which sounded very much like my father's, whispered in the back of my mind, "Don't do this, my daughter. Don't become like them. Don't let them destroy your soul too." I froze, arm raised, the mirror shard reflecting the terror in my brother's eyes. The anger, the hatred, the desire for revenge still burned inside me like fire. But that voice that reminded me of who I really was, where I came from, the values I had learned from the man who raised me with so much love. "Please," Nathan begged, tears now streaming down his face. "Please, don't do this, Evelyn. I'm your brother." "Brother?" I repeated, my voice trembling with contained emotion. "You were never my brother. A brother protects, cares, respects. You are just a monster who happens to have the same blood as me." And then, in a movement that surprised us both, I lowered my arm. Not out of fear, not out of weakness, but by choice, by a conscious decision not to become like them, not to let that place, those people, those experiences destroy the last remnant of humanity that still existed within me. "You're not worth it," I said, taking a step back. "None of you is worth it, but I am, and that's why I'm leaving." The expression of relief on his face was quickly replaced by confusion, then anger. "You're not going anywhere," he said, trying to get up, but still unbalanced by alcohol. "Yes, I am," I replied calmly, picking up my small bag. "And if you try to stop me, I swear to God I won't hesitate this time." I raised the mirror shard again, making it clear I wasn't bluffing. He backed off, falling sitting again. "She'll find you," he threatened, hatred now evident in his voice. "No matter where you go, she'll find you and make you pay." "Let her try," I replied, walking toward the door. "But tell her I'm taking the money. All that dirty money you earned selling my body. And also tell her that if she ever crosses my path again, she'll wish she never brought me to this house." Before walking out the door, I looked back one last time, at the broken mirror on the floor, at my brother fallen among the shards, at that small room that had been my particular hell for almost 4 months. "Goodbye, Nathan," I said, with a calmness that came from the certainty of doing the right thing. "I hope one day you look in the mirror and see the monster you've become. And may that vision torment you for the rest of your life, just as it tormented me." With those words, I walked out into the night, out to freedom, to an uncertain future, but one that couldn't be worse than the past I was leaving behind. I left carrying with me only a photo of my father, the money of my personal justice, and 2 carefully wrapped mirror shards, not as weapons, but as reminders. Reminders of what I had survived, what I had overcome, and the choice I had made not to become like them. The night was dark, the streets deserted at that hour. I walked quickly, not looking back, guided only by the weak light of the street lamps and the determination to find a place where I could start over, where I could, little by little, rebuild the shards of my life, just like the shards of that mirror I carried with me. And as I walked, I felt that my father would be proud, not of the anger, not of the hatred, not of the thoughts of revenge I had nurtured, but of the final choice, of the decision to keep my humanity intact, even after everything, of not allowing those who had tried to destroy me to succeed, of moving forward, wounded but not broken, marked but not defeated. The early morning was cold, but inside me burned a flame that no one else could extinguish, the flame of freedom, of recovered dignity, of the chance to rebuild my life on my own terms. And so it was, at 16, with an improvised bag and invisible scars that would never completely heal, that I took the first step toward a future that at that moment I couldn't even imagine how it would be. The Seattle bus station was practically empty at that hour of the morning. Just a few sleepy travelers, bus drivers drinking strong coffee, and me, a 16-year-old girl with frightened eyes and an improvised bag containing everything that was left of my world. I bought a ticket for the first bus that would leave from there, not caring where it was going. I just wanted distance, wanted to put as many miles as possible between me and that nightmare. The destination on the ticket said Portland. I had never been to Portland, didn't know anyone there, had no idea what awaited me. But anything would be better than staying in Seattle, where at any moment my mother and Nathan could find me and drag me back to that hell. Sitting in the last row of the bus, hugging my small bag, I watched the lights of Seattle fade away as the vehicle hit the road. I didn't feel immediate relief, or joy, or even hope. I was numb, as if my body and mind had created a barrier to protect me from the avalanche of emotions that I knew would eventually come. The scenes of the last 4 months flashed through my mind like fragments, too painful to be processed entirely. The first time I was forced to look in the mirror, my mother's voice saying, "Learn to serve a man." Nathan's rough hands, the looks, the bruises I tried to hide, the feeling of disappearing a little each day. At some point during the journey, exhaustion overcame me, and I fell into a restless sleep, populated by nightmares where mirrors broke and the shards transformed into monsters that chased me. I woke up startled when the driver announced our arrival in Portland after about 3 hours of travel. Portland's bus station was larger, busier than Seattle's, full of different colors and accents. I immediately felt lost, an insignificant ant in a world too big and indifferent to my pain. Where to go? What to do? How to survive in an unknown city with no one to help me? I sat on a bench and counted the money I had taken from the cookie tin. It was a considerable amount, more than I had ever seen in my life. Enough to rent a simple room for a few months, perhaps, until I could find a job and get established. But where to find this room? How would a 16-year-old girl alone manage to rent anything without raising suspicions? "Miss, are you lost?" The voice startled me. It was an elderly black woman with graying hair and a face marked by time who was selling handmade crafts at an improvised table near my bench. I hesitated before answering. My recent experience had destroyed any trust I might have had in people. "I'm looking for a place to stay," I finally replied, my voice low, my eyes vigilant. The woman examined me for a moment, her dark eyes seeming to see beyond my appearance. Beyond the thin face, the deep circles under my eyes, the defensive posture. "You ran away from home, didn't you?" she asked, with no judgment in her voice. I didn't answer, but my silence was answer enough. "Must have your reasons," she continued, nodding as if talking to herself. "A girl doesn't go off alone unless what she left behind is worse than the unknown." I felt tears burning in my eyes, but I held them back. I had cried too much in the last few months. Tears didn't solve anything. "My daughter has a boarding house near Pioneer Square," the woman said after a moment of silence. "It's nothing fancy, but it's clean and safe. She might be able to give you a room in exchange for help with cleaning and in the kitchen. If you want, I can take you there." I was suspicious, of course. After everything I had been through, how could I not be suspicious? But something about that woman, in the sincerity of her gaze, in her simple way of speaking, gave me courage to accept. And besides, what choice did I have? Stay wandering the streets of an unknown city? Mrs. Rose, that was her name, took me to her daughter's boarding house, an old building in the heart of Portland, with peeling but clean walls, narrow corridors, and a wooden staircase that creaked with each step. The place smelled of fresh coffee and lavender and housed a curious mixture of students, workers, and some budget-conscious tourists. Lena, Mrs. Rose's daughter, was a strong woman with a powerful voice and large gestures. She listened to the story I made up, that my parents had died and I had come to Portland looking for work, with a look that clearly said she didn't believe a word, but wasn't going to pressure me. "There's a small room in the back," she said, showing me a small but clean space with a narrow bed, an old wardrobe, and a window that overlooked an inner courtyard. "You can stay here in exchange for help with cleaning and in the kitchen, like my mother said. And I'll pay you a small salary too, so you have your own money. But no trouble, understood? This is a respectable house." I accepted immediately, grateful for the opportunity, for the unexpected kindness, for the chance to start over. That same night, lying on the narrow bed in my new room, I allowed the tears to finally fall. They weren't just tears of sadness or trauma, although there was a lot of that, but also of relief. Relief for having escaped, for being far from them, for having found a safe place to stay, at least for now. But escaping physically was just the beginning. The nightmares continued, almost every night. I would wake up screaming, in a cold sweat, reliving the scenes of horror in front of that cursed mirror. During the day, any unexpected touch, any sudden movement from a male guest would make me panic. I had crying fits for no apparent reason, moments when my entire body trembled uncontrollably. Lena noticed, of course. After a few weeks, when she had gained a bit of my trust, she sat with me in the small kitchen of the boarding house, late at night when everyone had already retired. "Girl," she said, serving an herbal tea she had prepared, "I don't know what happened to you before you came here, and I won't ask if you don't want to tell. But whatever it is, it's eating you up inside. And if you don't let it out somehow, it will end up destroying you." I looked at that strong woman, at those eyes that showed no pity, but understanding, and something inside me, a dam of contained emotions, simply broke. The words began to come out, hesitant at first, then in a flow impossible to contain. I told everything, about my father, about his death, about going to my mother's house in Seattle. I told about the business she and Nathan had set up at the expense of my dignity, about the men, about the mirror, about the horror of being forced to watch my own degradation. Lena listened to everything in silence, just holding my hands when tears prevented me from continuing. When I finally finished, exhausted and empty, she hugged me, the first genuine hug I had received since my father's death. "You're stronger than you think, girl," she said, her voice deep with contained emotion. "You survived the worst kind of betrayal, that of your own family, and you still had the courage to run away, to seek something better for yourself. That's strength, you know? A strength that few have, Those words, spoken with such conviction, planted a small seed of hope inside me. Maybe she was right. Maybe there was strength in surviving, in continuing, in not allowing myself to be completely destroyed. In the months that followed, I worked hard at the boarding house, cleaning rooms, helping in the kitchen, learning to manage the small business. Lena became more than an employer. She became a mentor, a friend, a maternal figure I had never had. "You need to study," she insisted, seeing my interest in the books that some guests left behind. "There's a night school downtown. I'll talk to the principal, an old friend. You can finish your studies there." The idea scared me at first. Return to a classroom, interact with other people, expose myself to the outside world after everything I had been through. But Lena was persistent. "Education is the only thing no one can take away from you," she would say, not knowing she was echoing my father's exact words. And so, almost a year after arriving in Portland, I returned to school. I was behind, of course, had lost almost 2 years of schooling. But the principal, understanding my situation, though not knowing all the details, allowed me to take makeup tests, attend extra classes, compensate for lost time. Studying became my escape, my therapy, my silent revenge against those who had tried to reduce me to an object. Each book I read, each knowledge I acquired, each good grade I received was like a small triumph, an affirmation that they had not managed to destroy my mind, my soul, my future. But the traumas didn't disappear completely, of course. They remained there, hidden in the shadows of my mind, emerging at the most unexpected moments. Any romantic suggestion, any more intimate approach would cause me immediate panic. I had some friends at school, but kept them all at a safe distance, unable to trust completely, unable to open up again. The only personal objects I had brought with me, besides my father's photo, were those 2 mirror shards. I kept them in a small box under my bed, and sometimes, on nights when the nightmares were worse, I would take them out and look at my fragmented reflection in those sharp surfaces, not as self-punishment, but as a reminder of what I had survived, what I had overcome, of the choice I had made not to become like them. I finished high school with excellent grades, standing out especially in literature and history. Lena, proud as if she were my biological mother, insisted that I should try for college. "You have potential, girl," she would say, as we prepared dinner together in the boarding house kitchen. "You can't stay here forever, cleaning rooms and washing dishes. You need to aim higher." I applied to Portland State University for the English Literature program. I studied like never before, taking advantage of every free moment between my tasks at the boarding house. And when the list of accepted students came out, there was my name, Evelyn May Caldwell. Accepted in 12th place. I cried when I saw that list, cried embracing Lena and Mrs. Rose, cried thinking of my father and how proud he would have been. It was more than a place at the university. It was proof that I had made it, that I had survived, that I had a future ahead despite everything. Balancing university studies with work at the boarding house wasn't easy. The nights were short, the fatigue constant, the difficulties numerous, but each obstacle overcome strengthened me a little more, distanced me a little more from that broken girl who had arrived in Portland on a desperate morning. It was at the university that I met Eleanor, a professor of American literature who would become a decisive influence in my life. She was a strong, independent woman with a sharp intelligence and a rare sensitivity. She noticed my interest in literature, my dedication to studies, but also noticed the invisible scars I carried. "You write well, Evelyn," she said one day, after reading an assignment I had done on Sylvia Plath. "Have you ever thought about putting your experiences on paper? Sometimes transforming pain into art is the best way to exercise it." The suggestion echoed in my mind for days. Write about what I had lived through? Expose those still so sensitive wounds? I didn't know if I would have the courage, if I could relive it all, even if it was through words. But one night, after a particularly vivid nightmare, I took an old notebook and began to write. The words came with difficulty at first, stumbling over each other, insufficient to express the horror of what I had lived through. But gradually, like a dammed river that finally finds an opening, they began to flow. I wrote about my father, about our simple but happy life in Willowbrook. I wrote about his death, about going to Seattle, about the hell I found in my mother and brother's house. I wrote about the mirror, about the men, about the daily degradation, about the escape plan, about the decision not to become like them. I wrote about arriving in Portland, about Mrs. Rose and Lena, about the difficult but possible new beginning. When I finished, it was almost morning. I had filled pages and pages with my story, had cried and trembled, and almost given up several times, but I had managed. I had transformed that horror into words, had given form and name to my monsters. Reluctantly, I showed the text to Eleanor the following week. She read in silence, her face serious, her eyes sometimes welling up. When she finished, she looked at me with a mixture of admiration and compassion. "This can't stay hidden in a drawer, Evelyn," she said. "It's too powerful, too important. It can help other women who have gone through similar situations feel less alone, less guilty, less ashamed." The idea of publishing my story, of exposing it to the world, terrified me. What if my mother and Nathan read it? What if they found me after so many years? What if people judged me, blamed me, didn't believe me? "You can use a pseudonym," Eleanor suggested, perceiving my fear. "You can change some details, the names, the places. What matters is the essence, the emotional truth of what you experienced." I thought a lot about this. For weeks, months, I weighed the risks and benefits. Until one day, reading the newspaper in the small university library, I saw a news item that froze my blood. "Woman and son arrested in Seattle for human trafficking and sexual exploitation of minors." The photo showed my mother and Nathan being led away by police officers, heads down, handcuffs on their wrists. The report detailed how they had been discovered. A 15-year-old girl had managed to escape and report them. The police found 3 other girls in the house, all in a situation similar to what I had experienced years before. Conflicting feelings invaded me. Relief that they had finally been caught, that they had been prevented from doing to others what they had done to me. Anger that it wasn't me who had reported them, that I had simply run away instead of seeking justice. Guilt about those other girls, who perhaps could have been spared if I had had the courage to go to the police when I escaped. And it was this last feeling, guilt, that finally gave me courage to follow Eleanor's advice. If my story could help a single girl avoid what I went through, or find strength to escape from a similar situation, or simply feel less alone in her pain, then the risk was worth it. The exposure was worth it. I worked with Eleanor for months, transforming my raw account into a proper book. I changed names, altered some details to protect my identity, but kept the essence, the emotional truth, the real horror of what I had lived through. And I chose a title that captured the duality of my experience. Mirror Shards. The book was published by a small Portland publisher when I was in my senior year of college. It wasn't a bestseller, didn't appear in the large bookstore windows, but it found its way to the hands of those who needed to read it. It began to circulate in support groups for women victims of violence, in shelters, in organizations that fought against human trafficking and sexual exploitation. And the letters began to arrive. Letters from women, and some girls, who identified with my story, who had lived through similar or even worse horrors, who found in my words an echo of their own pain, but also a glimpse of hope. Hope that it was possible to survive, that it was possible to rebuild life after the unimaginable, that the scars could eventually become marks of strength, not just of trauma. Each letter I received was like a small miracle, a confirmation that my decision had been correct, that exposing my deepest wounds had been worth it. And each response I wrote was a form of healing, for me and for them. It was as if, through those exchanges, we were all together transforming our mirror shards into something new, something beautiful, something that reflected not only the horror of what we had lived through, but also the incredible light of our survival. I graduated in English literature with honors under the proud gaze of Lena and Mrs. Rose, whom I considered my chosen family. The book, although modest in sales, opened doors I never imagined possible. I was invited to give talks at schools, at non-governmental organizations, at events about women's rights. My voice, which had been so brutally silenced in adolescence, now found attentive ears, open hearts. And it was at one of these talks, at an event about literature and trauma in Boston, that I met Michael. He was a psychologist, worked with abuse victims, had read my book, and wanted to talk about how writing could be a therapeutic tool. He was a gentle man, with a calm voice and kind eyes, who reminded me a little of my father in his careful way of speaking, in the genuine respect he showed. We talked for hours that day and exchanged emails in the weeks that followed. We talked about books, about work, about the small joys of everyday life. Never about romance, never about intimacy. As if he intuitively knew that these were dangerous waters for me, minefields I still couldn't navigate. Our friendship grew slowly, carefully, built on foundations of mutual respect and honest conversations. It took me a long time to trust him completely, to let fall the barriers I had erected around my heart. But he was patient, never pressured me, never demanded more than I was ready to give. And so, almost 10 years after escaping that hell in Seattle, I found something I thought would never be possible. Love. A love different from anything I knew. A love that didn't hurt, didn't humiliate, didn't demand. A love that healed, that respected, that understood. Michael and I got married in a simple ceremony in Portland, with Lena, Mrs. Rose, and a few close friends as witnesses. I didn't wear white. I chose a light blue dress, the color of the sky on a summer morning. I had no father to walk me down the aisle, but I walked with my head held high, guided by my own strength, by my own choice. Our life together was built with care and patience. We had a daughter, whom we named Roberta, in honor of my father. And when she was born, looking at that perfect little face, at those curious little eyes that still didn't know the evil of the world, I made a silent promise. She would never, ever know the kind of horror I had known. She would be protected, loved, respected. She would know from the beginning her value, her strength, her right to a dignified life. The years went by, and the pain of the past, though it never completely disappeared, transformed into something different. It was no longer an open wound, bleeding at the slightest touch. It was more like an old scar, still visible, still sensitive on certain days, but no longer debilitating, no longer defining. I continued writing, not just about trauma and pain, but also about healing, about new beginnings, about the incredible human capacity to find light even in the deepest darkness. I published other books, gave more talks, worked with organizations that helped women and girls in vulnerable situations. And I kept those two mirror shards, no longer as a reminder of horror, but as a symbol of my journey, my strength, my ability to transform even the instruments of my torture into tools of liberation. Today, at 78 years old, I look back and see a life that, despite its tragic beginning, was rich, meaningful, full, a life I might not have chosen, but that chose me, and that I managed somehow to transform into something beautiful and valuable. Michael passed away 5 years ago, taken by a cancer that gave no chances, but he left me with sweet memories, with the love of our daughter and our 3 grandchildren, with the certainty that not everything in the world is darkness, that not all men are monsters, that it's possible to trust, to love, to be happy even after the unimaginable. My daughter doesn't know everything. She knows parts of my story, but I spared her the cruelest details. Maybe one day when she's ready, I'll tell her the rest. Or maybe I'll let her read these words after I'm gone, when I'm no longer here to see the pain in her eyes, the horror on her face upon discovering what her mother lived through. For now, I'm content to be just Grandma Evelyn, with wrinkles on my face and stories to tell. The grandma who makes the best cornbread in Oregon, who tells the best bedtime stories, who teaches her grandchildren to value education, respect, kindness. And sometimes, when I'm alone, I take those mirror shards from the small box where I've kept them for more than 6 decades. I look at my fragmented reflection in those surfaces and see not just the terrified girl I once was, but also the strong woman I became. I see the shards of my life that in some mysterious and beautiful way I managed to put back together, not into a perfect, flawless surface, but into a unique and valuable mosaic made of pain and healing, of trauma and overcoming, of darkness and light. And that's what I want you to take from this story, my dears. That no matter how broken we are, it's always possible to gather the pieces. That no matter the darkness we face, there's always the possibility of light. That no matter who tried to define us through cruelty, we always have the power to redefine ourselves through our own strength. Oh, my dears, if you've made it this far in this story that was so difficult to tell, I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart for your kindness and attention. If you liked my story, please leave a like down below and subscribe to the Grandparents' Tales channel to follow more stories from grandparents like me who carry deep marks but also much wisdom to share. Thank you for listening to me. This grandma here has a warm heart knowing she's no longer alone with her memories.